Good morning, everybody. As Rose mentioned, I'm Chief Sid Peters from Glooscap First Nation, and I'm going to co-present today with Amanda Peters, our CEO from our development ventures. So what I wanted to do, I think, which was important, was really to understand where we come from first, and how we ended up becoming or working towards a development corporation. And we changed the name to Glooscap Ventures only because it's a much shorter name than Glooscap Economic Development Corporation. So having said that, back in 2012, when we at Glooscap, we ended up with a new chief and council. And for some of you that may not be familiar with Glooscap First Nation, we're a small community down the valley. We've got a little over 370 band members. But when we came in, one of the big issues and concerns that the community had to deal with remunerations of what the chief and council were receiving for salaries, and also all the different positions that they held. We had one councillor that had 4 jobs, and a few of the other councillors had 3 jobs. But anyway, when we came in 2012, one of the things that we heard from our community members, of course, was talking about transparency, accountability, economic development. They wanted more housing, they wanted more jobs, they wanted the well-being of the community to taken into consideration. So when we first got in, we were all new except for one councillor who was in council before for about a year. And the previous council that they were in for 16, almost 20 years. So as you guys know, sometimes communities, once they get in or whatever, and you get pretty comfortable, there's a lot of information and stuff that's not shared, or there's not a lot of information that is kept. So one of the things that I knew that we had to do when we got in was to kind of clean up some of the administration. I remember the community members asking me when I was traveling around, well, what are you going to do? Well, one of the things is, I don't know what we're going to do for sure. The only reason I said that was because we didn't know the complete affairs of what shape Glooscap First Nation was actually in. We knew that financially we were doing well because it was pretty obvious from what the salaries and stuff that was being distributed to the chief and council. So what we did, I guess, the first 8 weeks of when we got in office, one of the things was I took the new chief and council, we went into a boardroom, we stayed there for about 8 weeks straight, just basically went through anything and everything that was coming into the community. Because the other thing was we also didn't hire a band manager our first year, and the only reason for that had to do with was I felt in regards to the capacity development, our chief and council was to actually see what was coming into the band itself. So as far as administratively, we would look at the mail, we would answer the phones, we would do whatever we had to do. Because I felt that it was important that for the capacity development of chief and council, that needed to be done. So as our first year or whatever, as I mentioned, we went without a band manager. So it wasn't until the next year that we actually advertised for a new band manager. But I didn't like the word band manager, so I kind of changed that to director of administration. I thought it was important that as far as administratively, we need somebody to direct our employees. So I guess the other thing that we also had to take a look at was how are we going to attract good people, So one of the things we looked at was also that the chief and council wasn't supposed to hold any other jobs. So, for example, Councillor Larry Peters, prior to getting in, he was a Native Employment Officer and Economic Development Officer. So once he got in the position as a council, he had to give up that position. One other councillor was the fisheries worker, so he had to also do that. So as I mentioned earlier, one of the biggest issues had to do with the salaries, remuneration that the councillors were receiving before. So one of the things we had to do was take a look at what the salaries were before, and we had an individual, matter of fact, 4 different committees take a look at what the salaries and stuff were on various First Nations across the country, as well as businesses that would do something similar to that we do. For example, might be MLAs or MPs. And we ended up coming up with a salary grid in which we took to the community at a vote in August of 2012. And the reason for that was we knew that the community wanted us to be more transparent and more accountable, but we also knew that the salaries was a big issue, so we presented it to them. So as a result, we ended up that councillors were making $85,000 a year and the chief would get $115,000, which was $430,000 cheaper than previous chief and council. So we knew that, well, with this $400 and some thousand, what can we do with that? So that's when we ended up hiring 11 new staff. So we ended up, well, one of the individuals we hired within our first year was Amanda, who came on as our first director of administration. So we knew Amanda had, strong administrative skills, and that's what we needed to do. I felt in order for us to move forward, one of the things was basically to clean up our own shop before we start going into other businesses. So the other thing was that I felt was important was for us to try to keep the politics out of the business side. So one of the things we looked at was, okay, how are we going to do that? So we hired a new economic development officer by the name of Jason Peters, and he come in and we talked about setting up a development corporation. So from that, like I said, it was important to try to have that separation, because it's difficult when you get your counselors starting to try to run your businesses. It just doesn't seem to work. So anyway, so before we actually set up the development corporation, part of it was also doing a bunch of analysis on our businesses, because we're just like you guys. We have fisheries, we have a gas bar, we have our gaming, and that's pretty well all we had was our 3 businesses. So when we started doing the actual analysis and stuff on our businesses, within our first year, I think it was going into our second year, we identified a shortfall that we were losing cash. So within the first year, we identified at our first audit that we lost over $160,000 in cash. And so it's unfortunate or whatever, but we've identified that it was our manager of the operation. So we had it investigated. And that was one of the other important things was we knew we had lots of individuals that have expertise out there that come in and can help us move forward. So that's what we did, because you guys know as well as I that, within communities, if I think that somebody is taking money or whatever, and if I say that, then of course, between families, how it affects everybody. That's why we had people come in and do the investigation. So that was our first year, so we had that individual, of course, was charged and spent some time in jail and so on. So that was great, things seemed to be going. But the other thing through our assessments that we found had to deal with how our employees kind of take advantage of the way things work. For example, we had some of our employees, everybody would get, their vacation time. Everybody would get their sick leave, but what was happening was they weren't taking their vacation, so they were getting paid their vacation pay over on top, but of course they were taking their 15-day sick leave. But what they did, what our staff did, is actually had it worked out. They had it planned out that they were creating a lot of overtime, and they were getting paid extra on overtime. So some of them were actually getting as almost more overtime than what their actual salary was. So then, again, we started cleaning that all up. And so as a result, of course, community started complaining and saying, we're not getting as much work as we were before, and we're not getting as much pay. No, not really. All we were doing was cleaning things up and doing it right. in a sense of being more accountable and transparent to our community members, because we knew that when we come in, they've asked us to look at things, they've asked for us to clean up things, and I often tell some of the community members, sometimes you have to be careful what you ask for, because you guys asked for it and all we're doing is doing what you asked us to do. But just that alone saved us an additional $140-some thousand just with one of our businesses. So anyway, I just felt that it was important to clean up a lot of the administrative things before we actually start to move in our development side. But the other thing, I guess the other important part was really understanding how economic development works, why is it so important, because we knew that we wanted to do a lot of community development. We also knew that we were doing quite well in our gaming, but the issue and concern I had was our gaming dollars we're doing really well on our gaming, but eventually gaming's going to start decline at some point. So what we needed to do was how are we going to offset that? So that's when we talked about setting up this development corporation. And thank goodness we had an opportunity to purchase some land out on the highway, which was 25 acres of land, I believe. So in trying to also get the buy-in from the community, because they were always concerned about, you're putting so much money out on the economic development, but there's so much more community development we need to do. But I also said, in order for us to do community development, we need economic development money to come in to offset that. So that was 2012 we got in. 2013, we also needed to create a strategic plan on where the community wanted to go. So within our second year, we said, let's do a 10-year plan. So we did do a 10-year plan. So we completed that in September of 2013. And then it was in December of 2013, we started talking about, did a strategy in regards to setting up a development corporation. So we had that hired out and talked about where we wanted to go and why we wanted to go that route. So it wasn't until April of 2014 that we actually set up the development corporation. So what I was going to do is, my presentation is kind of a bit short, and I know you want to learn more about how the development corporation works. But I thought it was important to give you guys a bit of background of what we needed to go through in order to get to that side. And as I mentioned, and we heard it from community, and I knew as well administratively that we need to, as chief and council, be there for the community, build the community itself, try to run our businesses like businesses. So one of the other things in which we did when we brought Amanda on was we took a look at all the salaries of all the individuals that was working for us. And one of the things was we looked at their salaries, we looked at their qualifications, we looked at their job descriptions, because I felt it was important to pay our band members, what they actually should deserve. So the other thing was, of course, in order to attract good people, one of the things we also set up was a pension plan and a health and benefit plan, because a lot of the communities don't have that. And in order for us to retain good people, I felt that's what we needed to do. And of course, this all costs money, but it's important to, do your analysis, do your budgeting, and bring good people on. That'll help you, help you grow. I guess the other important thing was, being a small community, we knew we couldn't do this alone. So our community, the piece of land that we bought is off reserve. So it's fee simple land. But we knew we had to talk to the municipalities. We're on the border of Kings County and Annapolis County. So it was important that we created these partnerships and relationships with the municipality, with the province, and with the federal government as well. So there was lots of discussion, lots of meeting, lots of negotiating, But the other thing is being open to, for other possibilities and opportunities. So as a community, one of the things was, well, we were venturing into, unfamiliar grounds, and how do we ensure that the community members are aware of what we're doing? And like Joanna said, we all want to see something happening. If you're going to build a house, I want to see the 2x4s on the lot or whatever and start building. Well, it's the same thing here. They wanted to see things happening. They want to see it moving. And Amanda will talk to you a little bit about some of the delays in which we run into, but it wasn't the delays from ourselves. It had to do with some rezoning issues. We talk about branding, because one of the things I felt it was important that no matter what you do, you want to be recognized as somebody or something, or have a legacy, or also have your community to be proud of who they are. Because that was one of the other things that we worked towards is, prior to us, there was issues. Glooscap was known right across the country with, in regards to the salaries and so on. So we needed to change the environment of our community, to make them proud of who they are and where they're located, and also, determining a good branding mechanism for whatever developments we do. So for example, we have the Glooscap landing here. Amanda will probably go through, we have a logo for that as well. But one of the other things that was important when we were going through the branding exercise has to deal with, we hired this company to come in and we talked about rebranding, but one of the things that kept coming up was they didn't want to have Glooscap as part of the branding. And I remember getting pretty frustrated at a meeting one time and said, as chief and council, we've already spent 2 years on trying to promote Glooscap, trying to bring, the members back and be proud of who they are. And why would we not have Glooscap as part of our branding? And I think it's important, no matter what we do, no matter what activities, there's always the branding of Glooscap somewhere that recognized that attachment as a big family. So that's what we have here is so that's why we have Glooscap. We spelt it, in the Mi'kmaq way, as well as we came up with Ventures because it was a, much smaller name, and plus it's a venture in which we're going through. It's going to be a interesting journey. So we're pretty excited about that. We're not quite as far on as Madawaska for sure, as Joanna and her team, but you heard her mention that she's been in the works for 10 years. We've just started this in really 2014, so it's only been 3 years ago. And we're moving forward in our development right now. We're almost 12 to 14 months behind where we should be. But again, it's just one of those things that you go through when you first start. So I'm not going to hold you up because I think it's important that Amanda provide the more detail about the Glooscap Ventures. Okay?
Is it okay? Is that working? Is it okay if I sit down here so I can use my computer to show you some graphics and stuff? Hi, Juliana. So my name is Amanda Peters, and I'm the CEO of Glooscap Ventures. And I'll start with the branding since it's up on the screen. So what we want to do, as the chief said, is we wanted to make sure that everybody knew that every business we had was connected to Glooscap First Nation. It's very important to know for people in the Annapolis Valley and the wider world to know who owned what. So we did bring in a company. We spent a good deal of money and a good deal of time consulting the community on the branding. And this is what they came up with. And if you look at our logo, it's a circle, and there's a canoe at the bottom. And then there's sweetgrass, the face of Glooscap, there's an eagle feather, and then the whale's tail. So these all relate to our culture legends. So for example, the whale's tail, if you know the story of Glooscap, when he wanted to take a bath and he got the beaver to make him a dam, and then the whale was angry and said, "You've taken my water." So she used her tail to slap down on the Bay of Fundy, destroy the dam, and that's why we have the highest tides in the world. So from Glooscap Landing, you can actually see that area. So we decided we put the whale tail in there for local legend. And all of the other branding, so Glooscap Landing, the Glooscap Variety Store, gaming, fisheries, all of the branding is related directly to this. So for example, I feel like that's really loud. Sorry. The Glooscap Landing logo is the same color scheme. We have the sweetgrass here, we have Glooscap's face, and we have the whale's tail. So everything's going to be related, same color scheme, because we want everybody to know that it is Glooscap's. So that's a short, brief branding. Now we have a branding handbook, which my VP of Operations, Liz Marine, is adamant we use at all times. Everything has to match, everything has to be associated. I'm just going to show you how we've established the corporation. But basically, Glooscap First Nation, the people of Glooscap First Nation, 370 or so, are 100% shareholders in the corporation. So they own us. We belong to Glooscap First Nation, the people of Glooscap First Nation. This is our structure. So the community is here, chief and council is here, but we have an independent board of directors. So as I want to call her Chief Joanna, as Joanna has said and Chief Sid has said, it's important to separate the politics from the business. So we have an independent board of directors, which is made up of 7 First Nations individuals and 6 non-First Nations individuals. And the way it came about was, this was before my time, so I'm paraphrasing, is that they decided it was important to have experts on our board. So on our board, we have an expert in accounting, we have an expert on financial management, we have an HR expert, we have an IT expert, we have a communications expert. So we went around and got all these people, and they were very excited, and they joined our board. We also have a youth representative from our community. We have an elder from our community. Chief and council are members of the board, but only these 2 over here are voting members. So the chief is the chair of the board. The council responsible for economic development, which is Larry Peters, he's a voting member of the board. The other 2 councillors are welcome to attend the meetings. They are not voting members. So that helps to keep the politics and the business separate. So then you see down here, there's me, Amanda Peters, and then the whole staff of Glooscap Ventures. So what we do is we manage the entities. We don't own anything. Glooscap Ventures doesn't own anything. We just manage it for chief and council. So the on-reserve businesses, the gaming room, the gas bar, and the commercial fisheries, we manage them for chief and council. Glooscap Landing is a little bit different on how it's organized, and if anybody's interested, I do have some pamphlets here on how Glooscap Ventures itself is organized. It includes how is the corporation structured, how are decisions made, how does funding flow, and how does taxation influence the work we do. So taxation is a big deal, especially with Glooscap Landing being off reserve and fee simple. We have to carefully consider that to protect the assets of the band. So for our, also for the First Nations members on our board, Chief PJ is actually on our board of directors. So he's our legal expert.
I don't think, Amanda. I mean, we'll open it up for questions after you're done. I know it's hard to take 3 or 4 years and put it into 20 minutes or whatever, but there was lots of planning behind it, that's for sure, and that was one of the things that coming from I guess a management world and administrative world is there's so much planning behind the scenes, but that also costs money. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the things is when you're working with a community, every once in a while, for sure, you have to show what are you guys doing with the money that you're putting out. I didn't mention, but every year we have our annual meeting in August. And part of the presentation is the Glooscap Ventures that presents on the economic development side.
So this is the Ventures mandate. So this is what we do. Our mission statement, and this was all taken to the community, and they had a lot of input into this, is do something today that makes our community more prosperous tomorrow than it was yesterday. So that's our entire mandate. Our core values: do no harm, carry the good forward, leave no member behind, honor nature's gifts, and be considerate partners. So that is our mission statement and our core values, and we tend to get very positive feedback on those. And those, like I said, were developed with the community members. So as I said, we're 100% owned by Glooscap First Nation. We have 7 First Nation members and 6 experts in their field as members of our board. The chief and council decide how profits are spent. Glooscap Ventures itself does not make any money. The money we make, we turn over to chief and council, and we have no say in what they do with it. That's not our job. Our job is to make money, return it to the community. That's it. Hopefully, in the future, make a lot of money and return it to the community. So as I said, we manage the variety store and the gas bar. We've increased human resource capacity. We've gotten training for all of our staff. We sorted out, as the chief said, all the HR interesting anomalies that were happening. Last year alone, sorting those anomalies saved us $500,000. We're calling it Glooscap Seafood, not Fisheries now. I'm trying to get everybody into that frame of mind. We do have 3 lobster licenses and 2 lobster boats. We are looking to build a new one this year. We're also looking at potentially exporting our lobster to Europe. So those are some things that we're looking at. We do have a community economic development officer. So while we're doing big business, we also want to make sure that we don't leave the community behind. So we have 1 staff member dedicated to helping community members develop their own business or improve their own businesses. So we worked with a local CBDC in our area, the community, I don't even know what CBDC stands for. It's an economic development group. We worked with them. They've agreed that on our recommendation, they will provide $5,000 loans to our community members, guaranteed by us, to pursue business opportunities. We've had 2 successful community members take advantage of this. One has opened his own specialty cabinet making business with our help, and the second one has opened her own therapeutic farm. So she has animals and she helps children and adults with autism and special needs to overcome their fears and anxieties. So we've helped those 2 people access this program, and they're very successful, and we're very, very excited about that. So what our Community Economic Development Officer does is he helps them develop their business plans, he helps them do the research, he helps them go to CBDC and make their case. So it's a really good opportunity. We do a lot of business planning. We don't do anything unless we know it's going to succeed. So we don't jump into things. We plan, because we don't want to put the community at risk, which I'll talk to you in a minute about our corporate structure. We're also looking at we have established Glooscap Energy. So I'll get to Glooscap Landing in 1 second, but Glooscap Landing is going to be a highway development project similar to yours, only on a much smaller scale, I believe. And what we're doing is trying to make it as green as possible and sustainable as possible. So we're putting solar panels on the top of our canopy at our gas bar. We're putting them on the roof of our gas bar. We're looking at efficient refrigeration systems that use outdoor air. So there's a lot of things that we're doing here to try to make it green and sustainable. And we're also we've been talking to people potentially looking into solar energy and wind energy. We're only doing things that are good for the environment. We're not going to go into anything that's going to damage the earth because our core value is do no harm. That's our roundabout. So here's the landing. And can you see my cursor when I'm doing this? So that's where the roundabout is now. It's finished, it's completed. And this is the road, and it's called Sweetgrass Road. And it goes through the landing like this and down the other side. And all of this area is ours. So the reserve is out here somewhere, probably right about there. You can't quite see it. Right here is going to be a gas bar. You'll see a little square here for a potential restaurant in the future. This is going to be a park area. We're also doing things like we're building a nature trail all the way around it, so you can walk around it. And along the nature trail, you're going to be able to stop and read about the Mi'kmaq people in the Annapolis Valley, their culture, their language, the importance of nature to the culture. Right about here, you'll see this little teeny piece that's undeveloped. When we bought the land, we discovered that there was an African Nova Scotian cemetery there. So Black loyalists escaping the American Revolution came up and established a church there, and they have about 20 people buried there. We didn't know this. They came to us and said this. So we've cordoned it off. We're not developing it. We're going to create a park there to honor their presence in the area. So we're working with the local African Nova Scotian community to do research. They're going to have a little park there. They're going to have panels telling their story, and that'll be along the trail as well. So we wanted to make sure that we honored their history there. Now, Glooscap Landing gas bar was meant to open in September of 2015. So we're very behind, and the reason is that the gentleman, and I use that word loosely, who lives in this area, actually that's his house, he's protested our rezoning. Because it's not reserved land, it's fee simple. We went to the municipality, we did everything right, filled out the proper paperwork, and said, can you rezone it to highway commercial? The municipality was overwhelmingly yes, because when this is up and running, we're going to employ 250 to 300 people. We only have 75 people on reserve, so we're going to have to employ people from the local community. The gentleman across the road didn't want us there, so he's protested our rezoning. He took it to an appeal to the Supreme Court. This is how far he went. He lost. Now he's taken it to the UARB, the Utility Review Board of Nova Scotia. So we have the water line put in. We have the sanitary sewer. We have all the pad prep, the roundabout. We're ready to build a building, and we can't because we can't get a building permit until he goes away. So that's one thing that we're dealing with, a severe delay. That's a lot of profits and a lot of jobs that haven't come to not only our community, but the local communities as well. So we're hoping to hear in the next day or two whether he's lost. We believe he will. But then apparently his lawyer tells us he's going to appeal that as well. So he could be put back on potentially another 6 months.